All right, so much we don't know, this much we do. If the market was worried about a constitutional crisis, depending on who you're listening to, with the media fallout reports of Jeff Sessions being forced out of his job as the Attorney General of the United States and waiting to hear from the Deputy Attorney General, who has a scheduled visit any second now, we're told, at the White House. It has a funny way of showing it. Stocks racing today on relief that the midterms are over and there's some closure on this predictable changeover in personnel of the White House. Is nothing out of the historical norm, or is it? So much, again, that we really can't piece together just yet. But again, if they were worried about that on Wall Street, they do have a funny way of showing it. We're going to get to the details of that in just a second. First, to John Roberts at the White House on what's happening right now. John.
Who says the market doesn't like change, Neil? What's most interesting is that the president, at about noon today, spent an hour and a half fielding questions from reporters and made a lot of news at that press conference, and then blew it all out of the water an hour later with this announcement that Jeff Sessions was resigning as the Attorney General. Here's the TikTok. Long before the president got anywhere near the East Room for that press conference earlier today, the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, called up Jeff Sessions and told him, again, probably one of the worst kept secrets in Washington over the last few months, that the president wanted his resignation letter. We don't know if this was a resignation letter that Jeff Sessions already had in his back pocket. We're sitting in the top right-hand drawer of his desk because it was undated. But Jeff Sessions sent that resignation letter over to the White House. Fox News, through the great work of Jake Gibson, our producer at the Department of Justice, was first with the news. And we confirmed from the White House that Matt Whittaker, who is the chief of staff to Jeff Sessions, will be taking over as the acting Attorney General, while the president sought a permanent replacement for the Attorney General. Now, the president was asked about changes to his cabinet during the press conference, specifically Sessions. The president deferred, saying, asked me about that at a little bit later date. Well, we didn't know it was going to be 90 minutes later. Also, the president talking about the Mueller investigation at that press conference, saying that it's not his intention in any way to affect the ongoing process of the Mueller investigation. Listen here.
I could have ended it any time I wanted. I didn't. And there was no collusion. There was no anything. I didn't. They went after hackers in Moscow. I don't know about that. They went after people with tax problems from years ago. They went after people with loans and other things. Had nothing to do with my campaign. This is a investigation where many, many millions of dollars has been spent, and there's no collusion. It was supposed to be on collusion. There's no collusion, and I think it's very bad for our country. I will tell you. I think it's a shame.
You heard the president there say that he believes that Mueller has strayed afield of his original mandate. Well, it's interesting that Matt Whittaker wrote an op-ed for CNN back in 2017 in which he said he believed that Mueller had gone too far in the investigation. That was before he was named the chief of staff to Jeff Sessions. As far as we know, Neil, Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general, is still overseeing the Mueller investigation, though it looks like Whittaker would have the authority over Rosenstein on that. Calls from Chuck Schumer to recuse himself, for Whittaker to recuse himself from that investigation. We don't know what the outcome of that will be, but I talked with a member of the president's legal team a short time ago who said as far as they're concerned, Rod Rosenstein is still running the Mueller investigation, and they have not made a decision yet whether the president will submit written answers that they have prepared to questions Mueller wanted to the special counsel's office. Fast-moving story, Neil. Get back to us in 30 seconds. We'll have something else for you.
Yeah, real quickly, my friend. Jerry Nadler, who's going to take over the Judiciary Committee, I believe, had already been concerned about the timing of this and wants answers, we're told. You mentioned Chuck Schumer and his concerns about Whittaker taking on a lot of these responsibilities. Do we know what, obviously you said this was well telegraphed. The president had not exactly hid his distaste for Jeff Sessions. How much this is escalating with the new Congress to come in?
We knew that the president was going to make some changes to his cabinet. I think the swiftness of Sessions' departure took a lot of people, even here at the White House, by surprise. The fact that the president, after about 2 hours sleep, woke up and sent out a few tweets and then told John Kelly to ask for his resignation. I think there's some other shoes to drop as well. Some of the other names that have been floated around, Ryan Zinke, the Department of the Interior. The Inspector General of the Department of Interior has referred a matter regarding Zinke and a land deal in Montana to the Department of Justice. Wilbur Ross has been talked about. The Defense Secretary, James Mattis, has been talked about. I think there's still more to come here, Neil, and that this is just the first shoe to drop. We'll keep on watching it as closely as we can for you.
All right, we are watching separately outside the Justice Department, John, and we've heard as well that, and you touched on that, Rod Rosenstein has this visit to the White House. Whether that was pre-planned or not, I don't know. I didn't hear your earlier comments. I apologize. But do we know whether it's being seriously considered that he is going to be asked to resign as well?
As far as we know, and I've been trying to nail down the actual topic of the meeting, this was a pre-planned meeting.
Okay.
Rosenstein comes over to the White House typically 2 or 3 times a week, and this just happened to be one of those coincidences where Sessions resigns and then Rosenstein comes over here to the White House. I mean, I expect that the topic of Sessions' resignation will come up. But again, as far as we know, there's going to be no change to the Russia investigation. And one of the reasons is the president's attorneys, Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani, have said to the president, look, we're getting close to the end of this thing. Don't do anything that's going to upset the apple cart and set us back to square one here. And if the president were to have Whittaker take over the entire investigation, that may be one of those things that upsets the apple cart. It's the same reason why people in and outside of the White House were saying, don't appoint Emmett Flood as your permanent White House counsel, because then we'll have to bring in somebody else to work on the Mueller investigation and get them up to speed, which is why one of the reasons why Pat Cipollone is coming in as the White House counsel. So the president's outside counsel is saying to him, we're getting close here. Let's just keep things going along the track they are, and let's see how soon Mueller's got a report. If Mueller doesn't come out with a report in the next few weeks, I think you're going to see a lot of pressure from the president's attorneys on Mueller to either put up or shut up, as it were.
All right, John, thank you very, very much. And no doubt we'll be going back to you at least one more time, maybe a couple of times at the rate news is developing here. John, again, at the White House, on the left of your screen there, outside the Justice Department, on the right, outside the White House, where we're waiting for Rod Rosenstein to make what appears to have been a regularly scheduled visit to the White House. I hasten to add here what happened at the corner of Wall and Broad today. You might find that in the middle of this back and forth, certainly in the political class set, where they're talking increasingly political crisis, constitutional crisis, another slow-moving Saturday night massacre that occurred during Richard Nixon's time in the White House, when one official after another was fired. It's hardly anything like that in the guys who buy and sell stocks. A lot of buying today, a lot of relief. A lot of this has to do with the midterm election results that seem to go, according to consensus, actually a little better than the financial community thought. Deirdre Bolton here to sort through it all. Hey, Deirdre.
Hey, Neil. Well, if you look at the rally, and we're showing the green on the screens, today's post-midterm rally is actually the best one since 1982. You have to go all the way back. So markets rising, they mostly do, Neil. I went back and I looked at data points actually since 1980, and they're basically up around 1% post-midterm elections on average for the week that those elections happen, and then up around 2% for the next 30 days. So this is historically consistent, anyway, with what we've seen. We also heard earlier from President Trump speaking about working in a bipartisan way. He talked about infrastructure. He talked about health care. He talked about lowering drug prices and signaled pretty strongly that he would be willing to work with Democrats on those issues. So that was another reason why we continue to see the momentum as we went throughout the afternoon. And then the third reason, Neil, you know, it tends to just take away a layer of uncertainty. However, now with the U.S. AG stepping down, it seems like one more wild card is back in. Back to you, Neil.
All right. Thank you very much, Deirdre. On the phone with us right now is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Alan, on these developments and what you think is with the Rod Rosenstein visit to the White House today, pre-planned, we're told, but what do you think?
Well, I think Rosenstein stays. I think the White House counsel and Trump's lawyers want him to oversee the investigation to finish it. But then I think the crucial question is, if there's a new attorney general in place and the new attorney general is confirmed by the Senate, the big question is going to be whether or not the report gets released publicly. That will be a decision that can be made by the new attorney general, because it has really nothing to do with overseeing the investigation. It's a policy decision. And we don't know who the president is going to appoint. He doesn't have complete free reign. There are enough Republican senators who wouldn't let him appoint a crony, who would at least insist that the person appointed be somebody of distinction and some degree of independence. So, the president wants a loyal person in there, and he has the right to get one. But there are limits to the loyalty that the Senate will allow him to demand from an attorney general. So I think the big issue is whether the report gets released, and that will very likely not be up to Rosenstein, but instead be up to the new attorney general.
All right, but would this acting attorney general, Matthew Whittaker, be in a role, he would be the superior to Rosenstein, would he not? And he would be the one calling the shots, right?
Technically, but I think he would defer for several reasons. Number one, he has his own possible recusal because of the op-ed that he wrote, although I don't think that's a ground for recusal. But I think he's the new guy.
Well, that's what Chuck Schumer wanted to do. That editorial alone was good enough for him to demand his recusal. But you don't think that's enough?
It's enough. Don't think it's enough. But I do think that he's not going to want to take over the investigation. I think he'll defer to Rod Rosenstein. And but then when crucial decisions come up, like whether the report is made public, he may want to weigh in and actually take responsibility for making that decision.
Now, was it your gut feeling that there was closure or that something was coming together on the Mueller probe? There had been talk that maybe within just the next few weeks we were going to get the Mueller findings. If that were indeed was the case, how does this complicate matters?
Oh, I don't think it complicates matters very much at all. I think if they're getting into closure, I think everybody wants to see closure. I think the president's lawyers want to see closure. I think the American public want to see closure. I think probably Rosenstein and Mueller want to see closure. So I think everything is moving toward a result before the new year. But remember, it's nothing dramatic. What happens is there's a report and it's turned over to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General then makes the decision whether to turn it over to Congress. Congress then has to, of course, if it's turned over to Congress, no matter what the rules are, it will leak. We know that. But it probably won't leak if it stays within the Justice Department.
Now, obviously, the president and his own legal team had to be aware that the timing would raise issue here. You're a great student of history, and obviously these type of, cabinet firings or replacements are nothing unusual after midterm election. This one in the middle of this, legal back and forth and the Mueller probe, what have you, it makes it a little bit more of a hot potato issue, but how much more one?
Well, I think it's a big issue because, remember, an acting attorney general is just that, acting. And he will be replaced by somebody who has to be confirmed by the Senate. And I think that gives the senators, Republicans obviously, who control the Senate, some say over who gets the job. And there are always a half a dozen senators, and we saw that even during the Kavanaugh proceeding, who are somewhat independent of the president. Look, it's the president's party, but there are limits to how far he can go. And I think there'll be some negotiations between those senators and the president as to who gets appointed.
Real quickly, Rod Rosenstein arrives at the White House, whether this is regularly scheduled or not, Alan, and they tell him, all right, Matt Whittaker's our acting AG, you're going to report to him. What's to stop Rosenstein from saying, well, then I'm out of here, I quit?
No, he won't do that. I think he has a vested interest in this coming to closure. I think he would quit if the president tried to tell him he couldn't do this or couldn't do that.
Or asked a resignation letter from him, right?
Yeah, the president has already said earlier that he's not going to replace Rod Rosenstein. And I think that's a decision that was made not only by the president, but by his legal team as well. And they may know something that we don't know, and that is that, Rosenstein, although he's been tough and all of that, may in the end want to make sure that the report is a fair and balanced one. So if the president and his team know that, and I think they want to avoid the appearance of a Saturday Night Massacre, I think Rosenstein has stayed until after the report. I think he'll probably resign once the report is made public. And, of course, the other thing is the president didn't appoint Rosenstein to be the acting attorney general. He could have done that. He would have been a natural, the second person in command. But, no, he went to the chief of staff, which is a very unusual choice. I mean, chief of staff is, different than somebody who's deputy or associate deputy attorney general. So that's very unusual.
All right. Alan, thank you very, very much. Alan Dershowitz. Historically, this is not unprecedented. In fact, it is more common than not for a president right after midterm election or re-election. We've certainly seen it with Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton. We certainly saw it with both the Bushes, President Bush Sr. and his son, that shortly after such events, they can kind of clean through their staff. This has some added implications here, whether the president intended that or not. Historian Doug Weed with us right now. Doug, good to have you. Let's review that this is not such an unusual event, maybe the nature of this and the timing of this, given what's going on with the Mueller probe is, but explain why that is not the case.
Yeah, I worked for George H.W. Bush when he was president of the United States, and after the midterm election, he fired his attorney general, Dick Thornburg, and picked William Barr. So it's very, very common. This is the big leagues. You got to have your big boy pants on. If you make a mistake or you hesitate, you're fired. And this is a guy who's an executive, business executive. He's going to do that. Stop and think. Reagan, Obama, Clinton, all of them moved through 4 different chief of staffs. Bill Clinton fired Rahm Emanuel after 1 year. So, no, this is not common historically.
But obviously a president would be aware of the backdrop, right, and know that, all right, this is going to look weird, even though it's well telegraphed, to your point. But other presidents have dealt with things like that and moved on. So the shock here might be about what happens to some of these other entities, whether it's Mark Whittaker in a temporary role as the acting attorney general, what happens to Rod Rosenstein as the deputy. Then it gets a little murkier, right?
Yeah, that's right, sure. But stop and think. You're president of the United States and you don't have a Justice Department. How are you going to run the country without a Justice Department? They're accountable to CNN. That's not in the Constitution. At some point, you got to be able to run the country. And you look at this last midterm election, and if you'll notice in the exit polls, they ask people why they voted the way they voted, and health care was big, the economy, immigration was big, to a lesser degree, gun policy. And then there were 24 other issues that each were less than 1% of the people who were actually the reason why they voted. There was nothing on Russian collusion. Zip, nada. After 2 years of billions of dollars of constant hyperventilating pundits on these other TV shows promoting Russian collusion, nobody went to the ballot box and voted to correct what they believed was Russian collusion. So no wonder the president calls it a hoax. So at some point, he's thinking it's got to end. There's a judiciary, there's a legislative branch, there's an executive branch. When can I get on with running the country?
All right, Doug, thank you very, very much. Doug Weed, it is fast-moving developments. You're on the phone with us right now. Former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales. Alberto, what do you make of all of this?
Well, I guess in response to your last guess, the president is running the country. As far as I can tell, the Russia investigation isn't preventing Donald Trump from doing what he needs to do to serve our country as president of the United States. And so, it is true that changes get made in cabinet positions and you serve at the pleasure of the president. I think the only reason we're really talking about this change is because of the Russia investigation, and we'll have to see what happens with respect to that. I'm clearly on record in saying that I think we need to let it come to a conclusion. We need to find out everything we can about what Russia did and who might have been involved. And so I've been supportive of Bob Mueller. I still support Bob Mueller. And, Jeff Sessions, we know in this position, and I know in this, having been in this position, you serve at the pleasure of the president, and when there's a time for a change, then a change is made.
So the Rod Rosenstein visit to the White House that might have been pre-planned or not, what do you think comes up there? What does someone like you look for? I mean, the most dire case that a lot of people and constitutional scholars are telling me they worry about is, we're going to fire you. We're going to ask you to resign, and he doesn't. Or others are just saying, no, just giving him an update on things if he doesn't know them already. What do you think?
Well, it's not a constitutional crisis if he asks the deputy to step down. I mean, that's clearly within the president's prerogative under the Constitution. He can do that. And obviously there are serious political consequences to doing that, even I think within his own party. As to what's going to happen in that conversation, I don't know. I don't know whether or not Rod has the kind of relationship that he can talk to the president openly and ask, well, what happened here? What are your expectations going forward? So I don't know. Again, I don't know. I know Rod because he worked for me as one of my U.S. attorneys. I don't know President Trump, and I don't know how he deals with people. In particular, I don't know how he deals with people that work for him. So, I would just have to speculate, but I just don't know.
Now, if he were fired, would that jar you?
It would jar me because I'm not aware of any reason that he should be fired. Although honestly, the president needs no reason to fire someone who works for him. So the president can do it just because he wants to do it. But I think given the political consequences and where we are with the Russia probe and everything, yeah, it would be jarring if that were to happen. I have no reason to think that would happen, but we'll have to wait and see.
Now, you've been very patient with it. I'm curious, what did you make of Chuck Schumer saying of Whittaker he should recuse himself? I guess a lot of dust up over this editorial of his a while back that seemed to show an innate bias or dismissing the investigation altogether. So the guy should recuse himself. Already during Adler is going to be taking over the House Judiciary Committee, has said, I need a lot of answers to a lot of questions. You could see how this is politically escalating. What do you make of all that?
Well, first of all, I'm surprised at the pick as the acting. Typically, it would be someone who's Senate confirmed. And, there are a lot of seasoned, very experienced individuals at the Department of Justice. They have to have confidence in the person at the top. And I don't know Matt Whittaker. I don't know his background. But I know he doesn't own a Senate confirmed position. So it is surprising to me. As to whether or not he should recuse himself, I think what he needs to do is have a conversation with the career folks in the department, and lay out the facts, and let them advise him. Let them recommend to him whether or not he should recuse himself. I don't care what Chuck Schumer says. I would listen to the career individuals at the department. Right. And if they say recuse, like they said to Jeff Sessions, then he should recuse himself.
All right, Attorney General, thank you very, very much. Always good chatting.
Thanks for having me.
All right, former independent counsel Ken Starr is with us right now. He created some waves not more than a few days ago, saying that from what he had seen, the president had not committed anything close to an impeachable offense, obviously, before all these other developments. Not that they would probably change that view, I would think. But Ken Starr, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you, Neil. Thank you.
What do you make of just the developments today? The president is free, obviously, to hire and fire anyone in his cabinet. People are looking at the timing of this. It was well telegraphed, I think, but your thoughts?
Well, for one thing, it's a very interesting order of succession. Rod Rosenstein is the duly confirmed Deputy Attorney General of the United States, so it naturally follows he would become the acting Attorney General.
But that's
if for some reason, I know that's not happening, but I think there will be some issues raised about that, because that is the order of succession. And
what do I mean by that? Fact that that's not the case?
Well, I think my point is there are going to be a whole lot of questions. The why would you go outside the regular order? Now, President Trump has shown a willingness to go outside the regular order. But here's a key fact. For all of his abilities, I've met him, I don't know him well, but Mr. Whittaker has not faced questions before the Senate Judiciary Committee with respect to issues broadly affecting the administration of justice. He was a duly confirmed United States attorney, and that's a very important position, as Judge Gonzalez was saying. So there's no doubt about his qualifications. What we have here, I think, is a genuine issue with respect to accountability. I'm not saying it's beyond the president's power, but when, for example, there was a Saturday night massacre, years ago, and I talk about this in my book. So Elliot Richardson, the Attorney General, says, I resign. Bill Ruckelshaus, the Deputy Attorney General, says, I resign. So what happens then? Bob Bork, the duly confirmed Solicitor General, becomes the Attorney General of the United States. So, the acting Attorney General.
Now, that obviously spiraled out of control. It was one person after another. It got a little crazy. This is just hypothetical, so you can ignore it, as you do with many idiotic questions. But I'm wondering if Rosenstein's surprised at this. He's not too happy. He is the logical, even acting replacement until they come with a permanent replacement. And as Whittaker moves to the front of the line, what if he were to say, Ken, then I'm out of here?
then we have instability of the department. And that's the other dimension. Today's story is, well, who is Mr. Whittaker? How did this happen, et cetera? The questions being raised will have to be answered at some juncture, including in a confirmation hearing in the fullness of time. But here's it. The Department of Justice needs stability. And so anything that does not promote the stability of the department so that the department can go about its important work, the thousands of men and women who serve very, very well, I'm concerned. I want to see the department, which I love. I had 2 tours of duty there. And Neil, I want to see the department do very well, and I hope that it will with this changing of the guard.
What was interesting, I read into the resignation letter on the part of Jeff Sessions. He made it clear this wasn't a volunteer effort, that, you know, he made it clear that the president asked him to do this.
Yes, and I like Jeff Sessions very much. I've known him since, Neil, he was the United States Attorney in Mobile, Alabama. Wow. This is his dream job.
And you're very old.
Hey, stop that. Yeah, not as old as I look. But every lawyer who serves in the Justice Department has this deep respect for the Attorney Generalship. It's as old as the Republic. Edmund Randolph, George Washington's first Attorney General, in that wonderful line of succession, through some ups and downs. So it's a venerated position that people in the department respect, and they want to respect and admire the Attorney General, even if they don't necessarily agree with all the policies. It's one of the great anchors of rule of law. So the other issue I think is going to come out is with respect to the integrity of Mr. Whittaker and his relationship with the President of the United States. There is nothing wrong, in my view, with the fact that Mr. Whittaker knows the President and the President thinks well of him. I think that's a good thing. Some will disagree with that, but I think history shows, including Robert Kennedy's outstanding service as Attorney General under his brother, John. and John Kennedy, President Kennedy, said, well, he needs to get some experience before he goes out and practices law. So, I mean, that was one thing.
The president's father was pushing for that particular pairing, but you know,
the point, Neil, is confidence. The president needs confidence in the Attorney General, and the department needs confidence in the integrity of the Attorney General.
Obviously, being a former senator, Jeff Sessions has a lot of friends on Capitol Hill on both ends of the aisle here. Chuck Grassley among them, the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman, is saying Jeff Sessions is a dedicated public servant and a man of honor. I was proud to serve alongside him in the U.S. Senate for over 20 years. His leadership, integrity, and dedication to our country as Attorney General are admirable and commendable. Jeff deserves the thanks of the nation for his service. I remain personally grateful for his valued friendship over the years. Others have gone on to say, whatever you make of the timing of this, is there something more potentially sinister afoot? That is the Mueller investigation potentially wrapping up. This is a way to force either that report or to force something else. What do you think?
Don't read too much into it. It's clear that Jeff was on his way out the door. I should say Attorney General Sessions is on his way out the door. I think everyone recognized that, undoubtedly. So the timing, and I expected it. I expected it promptly.
I think most everyone did. I didn't know if it was going to be the day, but yeah.
I know I don't have your confidence. This is the time to step down. I think people can overread these kinds of situations.
So let me ask you about, I told you about Chuck Schumer, said Matt Whittaker, the acting AG, should recuse himself. Obviously, not everyone feels the same way. Chuck Grassley saying, I look forward to working with Matt Whittaker as he takes the helm of the Justice Department. A fellow Iowan, I've known him for many years. Matt will work hard, make us proud. The Justice Department is in good hands during this time of transition. 2 quick questions. His view of that obviously doesn't jive with many other Democrats, and the fact that this time of transition, how long would that time be?
It's really up to the president and to the Senate. What does the president intend? Is he sending the nomination up? And we'll have a confirmation hearing, presumably, even during the lame duck session, because it's important for there to be a duly confirmed Attorney General of the United States. And so I had not heard that statement. I think it's terrific that Chairman Grassley has confidence in him. That gives me confidence, because the one thing you can take to the bank is Senator Charles Grassley is a person of total integrity. So he will insist, I'm confident, on on the Justice Department under the new general's leadership turning square corners, doing it right, and it's very important for the country to have confidence that the Justice Department is doing its best to do the right thing and to do it in the right way.
Now, obviously, you had said a few days ago before any of this that you had not seen anything, that, to your knowledge, that looked close to an impeachable offense. But how would you know?
Well, I said,
right.
You're right. I have not seen. So you're asking the right follow-up question. How do you know? Of course, I know that which is in the public domain, and I follow.
But I know they talk about. I always hear these people talking about, oh well, we certainly would have heard something, or something would have leaked out. And nothing has to
maybe, but maybe not. I mean, I think we underestimate the ability of the United States government, both, all three branches for that matter, but the Justice Department and Bob Mueller, and frankly, for the intelligence committees. They may know things that don't leak out. I have much more confidence in the operations of government than the average cynical person who's saying nothing works. Things work remarkably well by my limited lights of being in Washington and around Washington for 40 years.
Well, you also know what it's like to be a prosecutor in the middle of that glare and the public obsession with what's going on. And the rap against these type of investigations is that they wander far from their intended target. I mean, what started out with Bill Clinton to look into real estate transactions and the like ended up being about lying about a relationship with an intern.
But Neil, it's a bum rap. It really is. It's a totally bum rap because there are checks in place. Rod Rosenstein had to approve what Bob Mueller did vis-a-vis Paul Manafort. Right? Now, he's secured a conviction, and, I feel badly for Paul Manafort and his family, but the point is there were some serious crimes.
But you know what the president says, this type of stuff gets out of hand, and it gets to be a witch hunt, and it's going far afield from what it should be, and he feels targeted and abused.
Every president feels that way, right? There are lots of witch hunts, apparently, in our history, and yet so many of the so-called witch hunts end up bearing fruit, namely that there were violations of the law. So I understand the president's strong feelings. I was accused of leading a witch hunt.
I remember.
You do? You remember that? You're not old enough to remember that.
I wish I were.
But in any event, there are positions and policies in place, including during my tenure. As you know, I wrote a book called Contempt.
Yes.
And the book chronicles that, which I think the American people didn't quite get, which is the Lewinsky phase of the investigation was authorized by Janet Reno.
That's right. And things lead to where they lead, wherever they lead. All right, Ken Starr, best-selling author, of course, the former independent counsel. We have a lot more coming up here. Waiting to hear from Jeff Sessions, waiting to see Rod Rosenstein. So much going on. More to this. Right, we are still waiting to hear from Jeff Sessions leading the Justice Department. We're still waiting to get any confirmation of Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, where he is, presumably at the White House. More to this. All right, she's been breaking news left and right on this whole saga unfolding today in Washington, D.C. Catherine Herons with the very, very latest on what we know about the whereabouts of all our top legal officials, I guess, both leaving and coming into the Justice Department. Catherine.
Well, we're waiting for the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions still to leave the Justice Department for the last time, and then also for his former deputy, Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, to arrive at the White House for what was described to us as a pre-scheduled meeting. Prior to the midterms, my contacts suggested to me that if the Republicans were able to expand their majority in the Senate, they believed the president would move quickly to remove Sessions from office, and that's exactly what happened this morning with a call from the White House Chief of Staff John Kelly asking then Attorney General Jeff Sessions to resign. He tendered this letter to the White House, a simple one-page letter where he thanked the president for the opportunity to serve. He also highlighted what he felt were significant accomplishments while he was Attorney General, from more aggressive immigration enforcement, also the opioid crisis, and he concluded by saying he felt that it had been a tremendous privilege to serve under the president and to execute the president's agenda. We now, things have moved so quickly, have an acting Attorney General, Matt Whittaker. This is not a household name, but he had been serving as the Chief of Staff for Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He is a Republican, a political appointee. In the past, he served as a U.S. Attorney. My contacts say that he has very quietly behind the scenes supported the declassification of these Russia records that are specific to the surveillance warrant that was obtained in October of 2016 for Trump campaign aid. And significantly today at his news conference, the wide-ranging news conference with reporters, the president indicated that those records may be public very soon.
Amazing how people on the other side just don't want those documents declassified. But no, we're looking at that very carefully. I certainly wanted to wait till after the midterms.
Two final big picture points. One, my contacts within the Justice Department and former people with the FBI have all voiced concern about the fact that they've had really almost a 2-year period where there hasn't been an attorney general in firm control of the department. And that really began with Loretta Lynch in the summer of 2016 when she recused herself from the Clinton email investigation. Then Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia probe over his contacts with the Russian ambassador. As a final point, every time we've seen Jeff Sessions at the Justice Department at the announcements, whether it's been opioids or immigration, he's always, if I could use this word, really classy, even though he was really under a lot of criticism from the president and others, always seemed very committed to the mission and the people who worked there. And that was reflected in the letter that he submitted to the president today with his resignation, Neil.
Yeah, he always wanted that job.
He got it.
Yeah, he did. And now he doesn't.
Maybe not on the terms he expected.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you very, very much, Catherine.
You're
Chad
welcome.
Pergram on Capitol Hill right now. And Chad, obviously, with the new Congress coming in, there are a bunch of new sheriffs of all these key committees in the House, including Jerry Nadler, of course, who's going to be taking over the Judiciary Committee, and a host of others who might have some questions they want asked, right?
Absolutely. And Jerry Nadler signaled that earlier in a tweet here. He's going to be the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the new Congress. This is going to be a fine line that Democrats in the House of Representatives are going to have to walk. Now, the incoming, prospectively, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, she said that we're not going to have, and this is her term, scattershot freelancing in our investigation. She said that, Neil, in a press conference just about an hour, maybe 45 minutes before the Sessions news broke. Well, a lot of people on the Republican side of the aisle predicted that the Democrats were really going to try to get their hooks into the administration. That might be the case now because they have reason to do so because of Jeff Sessions' departure. Here's another thing. Congress comes back to session next week, the first time since the midterms. We now know kind of what these midterms are going to be about. They're going to be about protecting Bob Mueller. There's bipartisan legislation in both the House and the Senate. Tom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, Cory Booker, a Democrat of New Jersey, to protect Mueller. And there's going to be pressure to try to move this sometime in the lame duck session. It might not happen, but you can bet your bottom dollar that this will be, a top priority of House Democrats when they come up here. Now, here's a statement from Chuck Schumer, the minority leader. He said that if they were to get rid of Bob Mueller here, it would create a constitutional crisis, and especially if the departure of Jeff Sessions were a prelude to ending the Mueller probe. Richard Blumenthal, who is a Democratic senator from Connecticut, a member of the Judiciary Committee, he called this, Neil, quote, a break the glass moment.
All right, buddy. Thank you very, very much.
Sure.
Let's go to the outgoing House Judiciary Committee member, California Republican Congressman Darrell Issa. We told you about Jerry Nadler stepping into that post, and soon. Already, they're raising the red flags. Are you?
Well, I think the challenge is that legitimate oversight is the obligation of Congress. Unfortunately, incoming Chairman Jerry Nadler has a long-standing grudge with the president. He's made it clear that impeachment is a goal, and that makes his investigations very suspect. There's no question at all. And I have, as a longtime investigator on oversight and judiciary, Congress has a role, and this administration has and needs to even more provide cooperation with legitimate inquiries for the interest of Congress in its oversight role. And, I'm hopeful that the administration will continue doing it. Certainly the million documents and White House counsel being produced in the Mueller investigation is a good example of cooperation. But I was there when President Bush lost his majority and Henry Waxman came in. Right. Some of what he did was very legitimate. Some was not.
Now they're making a big issue or fear that the president is going to try to do something to Mueller, either discredit or even lead or push for his firing. That would not appear to be the case, but obviously that's a fair, and they want to guarantee that he can't do that. What do you think of that?
Well, I know I've seen some of the legislation. The reality is that if Mueller cannot come up with a single indictable event that went on in this administration during the campaign by any of its high-ranking people in the next few months, then his campaign, his campaign to look for it should end. 2 years is a long time to look for a crime you can't prove.
By the way, that we're going to know something. Forget a few months and a few weeks, and that the timing of this is odd, if that was the understanding.
Well, the timing right after the election is one of the few appropriate things to come out of this this Justice Department. They did indictments in the last minute of 2 members of Congress. So doing it right after the election would be appropriate. If they actually have somebody who did something wrong working for the committee for the president, great, bring it forward. But up until now, every single one of these indictments and accusations has been completely outside his mandate. And that's one of the areas that is frustrating. Do we want to protect Mueller if he has that and he's going after it? Of course. At the same time, you don't have a special prosecutor so they can go look for a crime. I don't know yours or anyone else's private lives, but very few people have never done anything wrong, including, jaywalked. So if you put somebody on someone long enough and you tell them just to go look for something, eventually they'll find something on somebody. So,
well, the president has always called this a witch hunt. I don't know what the final report will be, but is it, in your eyes, that?
It is a false narrative created by Hillary Clinton and the DNC that led to an investigation that is now looking for a crime alleged in that false dossier. So just because it was a false dossier doesn't mean something didn't happen. But at the same time, the case, the legitimacy of this investigation and special counsel was created by what we now know are discredited documents. So it is time to wrap it up or come up with something that shows that it was never just Hillary Clinton and the DNC producing a fake dossier.
Now there are new sheriffs in town, right? I mean, I know you stepped down, your district just flipped, went to a Democrat, but I'm wondering, what is it going to be like the next couple of years with Democrats in charge of these key committees, in charge of the House? Close as the final figures were, it's a Democratic House.
I was a ranking member in the last time we were in this position. And so, I know what it's like to be a chairman, of course, but I also know what it's like to be a ranking member and try to hold the chairman to do what they should do. There's plenty. We have 74 inspector generals that are just teeming with things that go wrong in any administration, not just...
Do you think we're going to see a lot of investigations? We're going to see a lot of subpoenas. We're going to see the president's tax records, on and on, all this.
I would hope that the first thing that the incoming chairman of oversight for the waste, fraud, and abuse that exist in government and go after some of that. Henry Waxman famously found out that we had flown countless millions of dollars worth of $20 bills to Iraq and lost track of them. We're talking about cash that just disappeared. Those kinds of things are part of Congress's oversight. So there will be legitimate oversight. Ranking members, now Republicans, have to support that on a bipartisan basis. And there will be clear witch hunts. There will be attempts to simply smear the administration. And the minority has to step up. And that's one of the areas that, and do we want to protect Mueller? So the public understands that Republicans have to be for making sure that waste, fraud, and abuse is taken on, because it happens in every administration. At the same time, they've got to be the ones that say, we'll protect the campaign, if you will, the administration against unnecessary and very expensive intrusions into their prerogatives to for the work with this bureaucracy to make it work better for the American people.
Well, do you think that it's just going to be crazy for the next couple of years? I mean, ahead of a presidential election, of course, the president was saying, we did better than most administrations in their first midterm, and indeed the Republicans did gain more seats in the Senate. But it's not going to be a kumbaya Washington.
It's not going to be a kumbaya Washington. It hasn't been since I saw people turn their backs and say that President George W. Bush was an appointed, not elected president. This isn't a new problem. But as somebody like you that looks at business more often than I look at politics, the market made a statement today. The market made a statement.
I agree with that.
The statement that was strong. That
if they were panicked about a constitutional crisis, they wouldn't have done what they did.
And often people talk about constitutional crisis when, in fact, it's simply something they don't like. I believe the
Well,
market.
the market is telling you that they don't think this will develop into one, but markets oftentimes can be wrong. Do you think the markets, their gut read on this today was right?
I think their gut read that that you can create investigations in the House, some of which will be appropriate and to be honest, beneficial, and the Senate will be that cooling saucer that was described historically that is not going to let unreasonable things from the House spill over into legislation. And that's going to be a big part of it, is that you can pass anything out of the House by simply ordering your party to vote that way, but senators aren't of either party willing to take what comes from the House and just rubber stamp it. So yeah. I think the split Congress is one where the markets are quite happy. I think they're also happy that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have some huge majority where she can run roughshod. In fact, there are people like Colin Peterson and other moderate Democrats who, quite frankly, are not thrilled to walk a plank for Nancy Pelosi.
Real quickly, we're told, Chairman, that Rod Rosenstein has left the White House. We don't know what happened there, but this was apparently a prearranged meeting. If he wasn't fired or asked to resign, what do you think it was about?
Well, you know, I would hope that he understands that he has a new boss, subject to confirmation.
Wouldn't he be offended that he wasn't he is the acting, the deputy?
He's a deputy.
So you'd think he would move up to that.
Well, clearly there's a conflict. He's been overseeing the Mueller investigation. If he continues to have the day-to-day responsibility for that, quite frankly,
Chuck Schumer says Whittaker has the conflict.
Well, Whittaker probably has no conflict. And to be honest, now that we know what we know about the investigations, the reality is Attorney General Sessions really didn't have a conflict, but he erred on the side of, if you will, being very ethical. I think the important thing is that if the president said, you're going to continue to do this job, but you've got a new boss, who isn't conflicted, who can look over your shoulder to make sure that what you're doing is right, then probably he should walk away saying, hey, I didn't get fired. I did get an opportunity to continue doing the job. But unlike Jeff Sessions, I do have somebody who's going to take a more personal interest in making sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
All right, Chairman, very good seeing you again. Good luck in your next endeavor.
Well, I look forward to life in the private sector or wherever I'm taken.
All right. Very good seeing you again, sir. All right. So, again, as I was saying with the chairman here, Rod Rosenstein has left the White House. We're still waiting to see outside the Justice Department where Jeff Sessions is or how soon he'll leave or whether he'll even talk to the press when he does leave the Justice Department. But a busy day. But, again, as Darla was pointing out, this is not unusual after midterm for a president to make some personnel changes. Maybe this particular one at this particular time raises eyebrows. A lot more after this.